So last time we were talking about Moses going back to Egypt to free the Israelites. So Moses was asked by God at the burning bush, and we talked about the acacia wood and how it just burns, and he still went to ask Jethro, his father-in-law, about leaving before he went, because he was a man of character and honor and wanted to make sure that everything was okay in the household that he had been in with Zipporah, his wife, for a while. 40 years. Actually, Moses was away from Egypt. So this is 40 years after he left Egypt. And then Zipporah packed up her 2 young boys and traveled approximately 300 miles. So I looked it up a little bit more, and if they traveled for 16 hours a day, it would take about 7 days. So I don't know that they would travel 16 hours a day. Maybe they would. So maybe it was 7 days, maybe it was 2 weeks, give or take. And then on the way, there was this weird thing that happened where God was about to kill Moses, and everybody knew it was because his son wasn't circumcised. And Zipporah circumcised the child, probably because Moses was incapacitated somehow, and then slapped the bloody foreskin on his foot and said, now I'm a bride of blood to you, for something, which again, I'm sure there's lots of layers of mysteries in there, and I don't understand a single one of them. But we have all of eternity to figure all this stuff out, so that's great. And it was also in the book of Jasher, it was mentioned that it was probably Jethro that suggested against the circumcision because they thought it was barbaric. So that's what Zipporah, our main lady of interest, was involved in during this journey. So it also didn't say how old the children were when this happened. So it's supposedly the older child. So if they were together for a period of time, this child could have been a teenager or even early 20s. But so that happened, and then they met up with Aaron, who God told him on the mountain would be his mouthpiece. And again, Moses wasn't familiar with Aaron at the time, so God revealed to him that he had a brother. And also, the Israelites were supposed to be freed to worship God in the wilderness. And that's going to come up a little bit later again. And then I wrote something and I can't read my writing, so I'll skip over that. And they were discouraged by their circumstance. And just again thinking about that, they're supposed to be freed to worship God in the wilderness, and they're discouraged by their current circumstance instead of relying on the God that's always provided for them. And instead of going through and reading all of these things, I didn't write down where we left off, and I know that we're going to scoot through a lot of this, not word for word, so I'm just going to start in Exodus 7, where Aaron's staff becomes a serpent. So Aaron, this is what happens where, so Aaron and Moses, they perform all of these miracles, and then the king's magicians also perform all of the same miracles, except for at the end when Aaron's staff turns into a snake, his staff eats the Pharaoh's magicians' staffs that turned into snakes also. So it's asserting the authority that yes, all of these wonderful magical things are real, and yes, even someone that is not engaged in relationship with the Almighty God can still perform these miracles, but God is greater. then all of these people and all of their miracles are subjected to God. So Moses tells Pharaoh, I believe we went over all this, where Moses tells Pharaoh, let my people go. And then Pharaoh just gets mad and says that now the Egyptians have to make all of their bricks without any straw. So all of this is going on, and Moses is just continuing to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And then Pharaoh's heart is hardened. So Pharaoh's heart is already hardened, and then as God told Moses on the mountain, God hardens Pharaoh's heart, because God tends to operate in whatever box we place him in. So Pharaoh had a hardened heart. So to Pharaoh, he was the God of the hardened heart. So God also foretold all of the 10 plagues that would be cast onto the Egyptians, and also again that at the end Pharaoh would still have a hardened heart, and God would harden Pharaoh's heart even further. So instead of reading all of the verses about all of the 10 plagues, I found this really cool little chart that talks about the 10 plagues and how they are meant to show that God is stronger than all of the Egyptian gods, all of the what I would say would be called Elohim, which are the lesser gods, where it says that God, after Babel, divided all of the nations and put Elohim in charge of all of the nations. So they're the lesser gods that are in charge of all of the nations that still have power, not as much power as God. So the first plague is the water is turned into blood, which the gods that were overturned here are Khnum, which is the guardian of the river's source, Hapi, which is the spirit of the Nile, and Osiris, which it was said the Nile was Osiris's bloodstream. So this was duplicated by the Egyptians. Again, just to recap everything, that as Moses is showing God's power, the Egyptian magicians are showing that they are capable of doing this too. So this was duplicated, and although this did produce dead fish, which the Egyptians didn't. Their one did not produce dead fish, but this one did, and which created a horrific smell. If I'm sure we all know Buffalonians at Lake Erie, before they go through and clean up all the dead fish, it's pretty gross. And the second plague was the frogs. So frogs falling from the sky. And again, this was Hapi, which is also the frog goddess of Egypt, and Hek, which is related to fertility. And this one also was duplicated by the Egyptians. And it's happened before in history as well, that there's been frogs that rain from the sky, and also fish. So there's a story or a legend, or maybe it's true, that there are waters in the sky where fish can actually live, and sometimes that gets disrupted, and then the fish fall, and the people know where the fish fall, and they come and gather the fish and eat them. I don't know anything about that, but so the frogs fell from the sky. And the next was the lice. So they got lice all over them, and this was against the Egyptian god of Seb, which is the earth god of Egypt. This one was not duplicated by the Egyptians, and it's attributed to the finger of God, which I haven't looked into that. It just says that on the chart, so that's an interesting thing. So if you upset God, he'll tickle you, so then you're itchy or something. I don't know. So then there's the flies that come, and that was against Uatchit, which is the fly god of Egypt. It's very interesting how many different deities the Egyptians have in their culture. And the notes say that God now makes a separation between the Egyptians and the Israelites. And, oh, okay, and no more plagues will come upon the Israelites. So up to this point, the Israelites were also subjected to all of these things that were going on in the land. So they also had to deal with the repercussions of the Nile turning to blood and the frogs falling from the air and the lice and the flies. So the next is the fifth, and that's the disease on the cattle. And that is, so that's 4 different Egyptian gods, Ptah, Minervus, Hathor, and Amnon, which are all the Egyptian gods associated with bulls and cows. This is the first that directly affected property, and the livestock were wiped out. The next one is the boils, and that was against Sekhmet, Serapis, and Imhotep, which the Sekhmet is the Egyptian goddess of epidemics, and the other 2 are Egyptian gods of healing. This was the first one, well, technically, I guess it's the second one, because the lice affected their physical bodies. And this was so bad that Pharaoh's magicians that had been up to this point challenging the Israelites, they couldn't even appear in court because they were so afflicted with these boils. The next one is the hail. And the Egyptian gods that were challenged were Nut, which is the Egyptian god of the sky, Isis and Seth, which are Egyptian agricultural deities because the hail wiped out the crops, and Shu, which is the Egyptian god of the atmosphere. So historically, this was a unique kind of storm for Egypt. They don't normally see this kind of weather phenomenon there. And at this point, so this is in Exodus 9, Pharaoh confesses his sin, but later changes his mind. And again says, no, he's not letting the people go. And the 8th plague in Exodus 10 is the locusts, and that's against Serapia, the Egyptian deity protector from locusts. So they had an Egyptian goddess that was supposed to protect them from locusts. And so Pharaoh offers a compromise, which I'm not sure what that is. It's probably, I'll let half your people go. And Moses is like, nope, not doing it. And then Pharaoh again confesses his sin, but turns his heart away again. And another one in Exodus 10, this is the 9th plague, is the darkness. And this is against Ra, Amnon-Ra, Aten, Atum, and Horus, which are all Egyptian sun gods, and against Thoth, the Egyptian moon god. So the dark in Egypt, it was dark in Egypt at midday, and light was apparently still provided for the Israelites in Goshen, which is the land where the Israelites inhabited at the time. So the 10th plague was the death of the firstborn, and that's where we will, well, actually we're going to pick up in Exodus. Well, I just want to touch on Exodus 11 for a minute, but this is in Exodus 12, and this plague was a judgment of all Egypt's gods, including Pharaoh himself. And in Exodus 1, Pharaoh killed the sons of Israel. We remember that's how Moses ended up in the palace in the first place, is because Pharaoh ordered the death of all the firstborn Egyptian sons, and now the Lord kills all the firstborn sons of the Egyptians. And now Pharaoh has decided to let those people go. So Exodus 11 is where they're talking about the preparation for all of this. They speak about, again, I'm not going to read it word for word, but everybody knows now that Moses tells everyone that God said that at midnight he's going to kill all of the Egyptian, or all of the Egyptian firstborns. But in order to protect the Israelites, they are instructed to kill a lamb and place the blood over their door. And this is what's called Passover now, because the angel of destruction, who is essentially the Lord himself, a different variation of the Lord himself, will pass over the doors that have the blood on them and carry on to the Egyptians. And they're instructed to be ready to leave. So they have their shoes on, they have all of their garments on, they have their staffs, their walking sticks ready to go, and they are instructed to not use leaven in their bread, not use any yeast in their bread. And this is, again, types and shadows of things that are to come in the future. We all know that Jesus is the Lamb and his blood is to save our lives. So there's that. And there's also the yeast, which in the New Testament is in reference to a lot of things that are going on with the Pharisees. And the yeast is akin to unbelief. So they are instructed to not have any yeast in their bread, in order to kind of describe how they are supposed to have complete and full belief in what God is doing. So now that Pharaoh is all of the firstborn children of the Israelites were spared, and all of the firstborn of the Egyptians were killed. And again, thinking about the women of this time, I can only imagine the wails of the mothers that wake up and then their babies are dead. And then contrarily, the joy of the Israelite mothers that their babies are saved. So then in Exodus 13, God speaks again to Moses at the very beginning and says, dedicate to me every firstborn among the Israelites. The firstborn offspring of both humans and animals belongs to me. And we'll see this throughout Scripture, where the firstborn is dedicated to the Lord in a lot of cases. So Moses says to the people, and again, Exodus 13, verse 3, this is a day to remember forever, the day you left Egypt, the place of your slavery. Today the Lord has brought you out by the power of his mighty hand. And also it says, remember to eat no food containing yeast. So God has done a beautiful, wonderful, marvelous thing that nobody else on earth could have ever replicated. Even the Pharaoh's best magicians were unable to replicate all of the things that God did through Moses, and then just in this circumstance. And so Moses is just God is reminding Moses to remind the Israelites that God was the one that brought them out. And again, remembering that the women were instructed to go and ask for all of the riches and the wealth of the Egyptians. So they were granted that. So they took all of those things and proceeded on to leave Egypt. And Pharaoh again changes his mind and chases after them with his army, and then Moses is able to put his staff in the ground. God splits the Red Sea. All of the Israelites pass through the Red Sea, and then the Red Sea closes on top of the Egyptians that are following them. So the Israelites are now safe across the sea, and The Israelites are now supposed to be in the wilderness to worship God. And so the wilderness it's a place that's set apart, again, where there's not a lot of things going on. There's not a lot of hustle and bustle. So the two places that are mentioned a lot in scriptures are the deserts and the wilderness. So the wilderness still has provisions and things of that nature, where the desert does usually not. So the Israelites are in the wilderness, set apart from all of the hustle and bustle of the world, in order to form a relationship with God, and in order to worship him. They're supposed to be there to worship God after he brought them out of this whole mess. So in Exodus 15:20, we come across another lady, which is Miriam, and she is now referred to as a prophetess. Miriam, if we remember, is Moses' sister, who walked down the river as he was floating down the river, and made sure that he was taken care of, and then invited his mother in to be the wet nurse for her actual son. So, and her name means rebellion. And they are singing songs. So here they are. Moses just sang a song to the Lord, and now Miriam is singing a song to the Lord. And we will read Miriam's song to the Lord. It starts in 21. Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. He has hurled both horse and rider into the sea. Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out into the desert of Shur. So again, remembering deserts are desolate places. They traveled in the desert for 3 days without finding any water. When they came to the oasis of Marah, the water was too bitter to drink, so they called the place Marah, which means bitter. Then the people complained and turned against Moses. "What are we going to drink?" they demanded. So Moses cried out to the Lord for help, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the water, and this made the water good to drink. It was there that at Marah that the Lord set before them to follow the following decree as a standard to test their faithfulness to him. He said, "If you will listen carefully to the voice of your Lord, the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, obeying his commands and keeping all his decrees, then I will not make you suffer any of the diseases I sent on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." So this is, I believe, the first occurrence of the name of God, which is Jehovah Rapha, which is God the healer, and that's used a lot in scriptures after this. So God is telling the Israelites, if you obey me and keep my commandments and keep all of these decrees, then I will be the Lord that heals you. I will keep you safe. So Moses is able to throw this wood into this bitter water, and it's good for them to drink then. And it's just again like a type and shadow, not even a type and shadow, just it shows how good God is, that he uses like weird stuff to make things good. And I don't know, I was trying to look up real quick what kind of wood he could have possibly used. I'll do some more research and see. I couldn't figure it out today, but just to see what kind of wood. I know that I think it's shungite that you can put into water and it will take out a lot of the impurities. So it's not surprising that there could be some kind of a wood that can also do that. So Moses was instructed by the Lord to do this interesting and unique thing to make the water drinkable for the Israelites, and there they are in the woods, in the desert with water. And then also something that I didn't mention, that after they walked across the floor of the sea, they were also told that God would be with them as a pillar of fire in the night and a pillar of cloud in the daytime. So thinking about what that would be like for them, that there's this fire there guiding them through the wilderness, and this pillar of cloud, and they would follow this through the wilderness, and then bitch about how they didn't have food or water or whatever, instead of just asking. Like they had every opportunity to behave in a different way, but they continued to complain about how, and so in the next chapter, in 16, talks about the manna. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around with pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted, but now you've brought us in the wilderness to starve us to death. Then the Lord said to Moses, look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven each day. The people can go out and pick as much food as they need for that day, and I will test them whether they follow my instructions. And on the 6th day, they gather food twice as much for the Sabbath. So this is the same the same material makeup. It's called manna. It's the same thing, and it only lasts for 24 hours. So that's where, give us this day our daily bread, and his mercies are new today. That he's the God of today. So they gathered, and the interesting thing as well is some people gathered a whole bunch and some people gathered just a little, but everybody had everything they needed. So that's a foreshadowing of what God's kingdom is, and when Jesus prayed, thy kingdom come on earth, that's how it's supposed to be, that everybody does what he's able to do and everybody's provided for in a godly way, not in a communist way. So they were provided with all of the water they needed, all of the bread they needed, and they just continued to complain and complain. And again, they were without water, and Moses was instructed to strike the rock, and water came pouring out of the rock. And then the second time he was instructed to speak to the rock to have water come out. And he didn't, because he was frustrated with the complaining Israelites. So he struck the rock again, and it did produce water. But God said that because he didn't listen, he would not set foot in the promised land, which is where they were going. And the trip that they were on was supposed to take 11 days. And it took, was it 40 years? Oh my goodness, now I can't remember. But I'll have to look that up. I can't remember if it's 40 or 400. I think it was 40. Jared, is it 40 years?
40. What's that?
In the wilderness.
Yeah, 40.
40. Yeah, I don't know. So it was supposed to take 11 days, and it actually took 40 years. And the rock is representative of Jesus, and so he was supposed to hit it once just to represent that, you know, Jesus was bruised and beaten for us. Well, he was supposed to speak to it the second time, and he struck it again because he was frustrated with the Israelites and all of their complaining, and he actually spoke ill to the Israelites, and that was what the problem was, is because the words that came out of Moses's mouth did not represent God's words. And Our Lady, her next appearance, I believe is in Exodus 18, where her father actually calls for her to come back. Yep, 18, it says, Moses' father-in-law Jethro heard about everything God had done for Moses. He heard how the Lord had rescued them. Earlier, Moses had sent his wife Zipporah and his 2 sons back to Jethro, who had taken them in. So it just says earlier. It doesn't say when it happened, but so possibly while Moses was still in Egypt, he had sent his wife back there to be with her father-in-law, where she was safe and protected. So that's Our Lady. Again, I'll do a little bit more research to see where she was sent back, if she went with him into the wilderness. I don't think so, but so I believe that's the last we hear of her. So that will conclude Zipporah / Moses, so the family of Moses.